Shalom, guys. Yeah, I haven't lost you yet, have I? Good. Good time in worship today, right? Yahweh is good. It's always good to come together and just to sing your heart out. No pun intended, but I guess it is, right? What we're supposed to do, right? When we come and you know, there's so many things that are involved in worship. I mean, there's an overflowing of your heart as an act of worship. The song is an act of worship. Everything that you do in your life, you can make it an act of worship. But today we're going to talk just a little bit about song, about, you know, singing and what happens when you sing. You know, I'm going to come to you from certain parts of Scripture that we're going to see. And there's something about song that goes beyond just words being spoken. I mean, words have power, do they not? And there are things that we may remember in our life that we've been told that we carry with us, and that can be in any direction. That can be positive or negative, right? So that words do have power, words have meaning, but there's something about a song that goes a little deeper. You know, a song can bring healing, a song can bring hurting, a song can bring a restoration. I mean, there's something about a song that really gets to the core of a person. We're going to talk a little bit about some of that today. I'm going to show you some scriptural things. I've got some quotes from some scientists for you today, and just really interesting things for us to dive into. I'm not going to, by no means, really any teaching that I do is all inclusive and everything, you know, totality of it. But I encourage you to take the notes, the thoughts, the ideas, and the scriptures that are given today and do like what Eileen was saying a little bit ago. Dig a little deeper with it. You know, dig a little deeper with it. Take it home and meditate on it and put it into practice in your life. Because isn't that what it's about? It's not about just hearing the word. It's about living the word. And that means it's become a part of you as we put it within ourselves. Okay? So today we're going to start with Psalm 119, all of it. No, just a few verses of it. Just 8 verses of it. It's verses 49 to 56. You may be familiar with Psalm 119 as the longest passage in, you know, of the Psalms, but there's stanzas of 8 verses at a time, and it's kind of a literary device, if you will. Personally, I think it goes beyond that. If you look at it in the Hebrew, you'll see the first letter of each line follows the alphabet. For the first 8 verses, every sentence, if you will, every verse starts with the letter Aleph. And the next 8 verses, each line starts with the letter Bet. And the next 8 verses, each line starts with Gimel. You know, okay? So it just goes through the whole alphabet like that. And that takes some thought. You know, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to do that even in English. That takes some thought. I mean, to write something out like that and make it coherent. You know? So I believe this is inspired in the Scripture, and Psalm 119 is not the only passage of Scripture that's written like this. But during the time of counting the Omer, each day, you know, we're going through Psalm 119, and then when that's done, because it's only for 22 days, right? When that's done, we're adding a few other scriptures to go into it. So if you're reading the daily readings for counting the Omer with us, you don't have those, we can get them to you. They're there, you can get it. But today we're on Zayin, Hebrew letter Zayin. And today's the seventh day. Zayin is the seventh letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Okay, it's not when it's Hebrew, it's not alphabet, by the way. It's alphabet, right? Alphabet is Greek. Right? So in the Hebrew alphabet, Zayin is the seventh letter. Today is the seventh day of counting the Omer. And so this is what we're going to read. So we're going to start off with reading that together, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to tie that into song and singing and everything, because Zayin, Zayin itself doesn't mean to sing. But, well, I'm going to get ahead of myself if I do that. So let's just move forward. What do you say? All right, so let's take a quick look at it. In the ancient pictograph for this letter is, you can see this right here, it's represented up there. It's like some type of agricultural implement similar to a mattock or a plow. Okay, it's an agricultural tool, but it also kind of looks like a weapon, doesn't it? Kind of looks like a weapon there. So the idea is there's multiple uses here for this. It can be an agricultural tool, or it can be a weapon. Meaning of the letter is harvest or a crop, and as a tool is used for harvesting, or food as from the harvest, or to cut from the function of the implement, and broad from its shape. The early Semitic pictograph is simplified, as you see here, and then evolving into a Z in the late Semitic script, and involved in the modern Hebrew letter. And then the Greeks and the Romans adopted the letter to become the letter Z, and the late Semitic became the number 7. Again, interesting that it's just kind of showing you how it goes through time, which, by the way, this is from the ancient Hebrew lexicon of the Bible. So how it evolves over the time, right? Interesting how the letter Zayin became associated with Z. I mean, that's the sound it makes, right? Z, right? So Zayin, and as well as the letter 7, and it's the 7th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. I mean, all these things coincidental? No. There are things, we have reminders of what God has done for us all over if we just stop to take a look at it, right? So Zayin, what I believe in the Psalms 119 is that each portion of it is explaining itself. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you read verses 1 through 8, and the letter is Aleph, and Aleph represents strength, it represents authority, right? So if we read the first verses 1 through 8, it's explaining what happens when we look at the authority and the strength that comes from God. How do we walk in it? How do we perceive it? How does He give it? How does He grant it? What happens with it? So I believe that each portion of 8 verses is explaining this letter. Okay, so today we're in Zayin, so what's the big deal with it, right? Again, think agricultural, think an implement for harvesting or an instrument for defense. Okay? So again, how does this break down? Now let's look at the verses and keep that in mind as we're reading through these. All right? So verse 49 is the Hebrew letter Zayin. It says, "Remember your word to your servant, in which you have made me hope. This is my comfort in my affliction, that your promise gives me life. The insolent utterly deride me, but I do not turn away from your law. When I think of your rules from old, I take comfort, O Lord." Notice that he's solidifying a foundation here. Okay? He's solidifying trust in Yahweh, trust in His word, right? And he's establishing this. This is what comforts me. This is what I know I can turn to that is solid at the end of the day, right? And let's keep reading. Verse 53. "Hot indignation seizes me because of the wicked who forsake your law." Look at verse 54. "Your statutes have been my" what? "Song in the house of my sojourning." The word there for song is zimrot. I'll come back to that. Verse 55, "I remember your name in the night, O Yahweh, and keep your law. This blessing has fallen to me, and I have kept your precepts." So I'm looking at verse 54. "Your statutes have been my song in the house of mourning." The word song is zimrot. So again, we're looking at all this. We're looking at keeping the law. We're looking at letting it be a foundation in our lives. We're talking about the harvest. We're talking about observing what Yahweh, the directions He's wanting us to go and to walk in all these ways. We're seeing others aren't doing it, but yet it doesn't relieve me from what I do for Yahweh, right? So all of this is coming in together. And your statutes have been my songs in the house of my sojourning. What does this mean, the house of my sojourning? Life is a journey, right? Now, is life always a pleasant journey? No. When Israel was in the wilderness for 40 years, I bet they were smiling the whole time, right? Matter of fact, we read very different, right? But here we see it says, your statutes have been my song. In other words, the song are the words that he has given us. Statutes that he spoke, this is his word to us. And so his words have become a song for us. Now we start looking at things like, why song? And why do they believe that in the Hebrew, each letter is related to a musical note. And so the words that are formed and written are songs that are sung. Why is it when they read the Torah, in the synagogues, they sing it? Why is it melodies that accompany it? Because there's something about a song can get to a person and it can bypass the way we think about things. Is that true? Come on, we've all done it, right? Even if you're not the kind of person that just is really into music, you still do it. You're driving down the road and you hear a song and immediately you're transported back to a moment in time when you've heard that song before. You're walking in the store and a song comes on and you remember something. Why did that thought come to mind? Because that song triggered it. How many of you are singing a song as you're driving down the road? You're singing to the radio, and you're like, I didn't know I knew those words. It's because it's in there. It's in you. Okay? And it can bypass here and go right into here. So an expression of a song is something within us that comes out. You don't even have to have words for a song. You know that? There are things called instrumentals. Where it's just melodies, harmonies. You could be humming, singing, whistling, whatever. There doesn't have to be words. It just comes out of you. Why? Because God put that in you. Okay? Something about it that speaks to who we are at the very core. Right? So, Zamar. The word mizmor is the word for a psalm. Now, how many of you heard, Psalms is Tehillim, right? Yes, it is. The book of songs is Tehillim. But a psalm individual is mizmor. Okay, so when you see it as a psalm, it is a Hebrew word mizmor. The word zamar means to make music. Okay, so I'll define that in a second, but the word zamar means to make music. Now, if a zayin represents something that could be a weapon, and then if we break down that word zamar, we have a zayin, then we have the word mar. What's mar? Bitterness. So if we have something about this, then we can look at this and see that a song can be a weapon against bitterness. That a song, if you start singing a song, and it could chase away those blues. It could chase away that bitterness and the resentment and just the thing. Why? Because now you're turning a focus. Okay? How can you sing joyful songs to the Lord and be angry? There's a change of focus in here, right? That's why something happens when you sing. That's why David is talking about singing, right? Read through the Psalms. I believe, about a third of the Psalms that David wrote, he was singing the blues, right? It was bad. If anybody knew discouragement and everything, it was David, right? But if you look at how in the midst of all these, he always turns. He talks about how bad he's feeling and how miserable, and God, are you even listening to me, and everything. And then he says, but I will turn myself toward God. By the time it all comes around, he's expressing the way that he's feeling, but by the time it's all said and done, he can't help himself but to express that he's going to trust in God no matter what. So there's that thing, that change of focus that happens when you do that, right? Okay. So, Zamar. Zamar, defining the word, Zamar, identical with the word that means to prune or to trim something, to prune something, through the idea of striking with the fingers. Like, how do you play an instrument? You strike it, or even a piano, guitar, lute, cymbals, drums, right? You strike it. So that's the idea of the word zamar. It's to play music, but you're singing with it, right? You're getting all of yourself into that. So it's all coming out of here. Okay, you are making music, even associated with giving praise and singing for. So mizmor, that's why mizmor is a psalm, but it's a song giving out to the Father. Okay? All right. Isaiah 2:4. Isaiah 2:4 says, "And he shall judge among the nations, and he shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into" what? "Plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." Joel 3:10, "But beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong." Micah 4:3, "He shall judge among many people, and rebuke the strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." Notice the similarity, if you will, of the weapon and the agricultural tool. Okay, so I want us to have the idea of this song. Okay, it can be something to help us plant, it can be something to help us grow, it can be all this, but it can be an act of defense as well. You know, in those things that we allow into our life, it can be an act of defense to help get rid of those things. You know, to turn our focus back into the Father and what He's wanting us to do. And to help plant. Plant what? Plant good things. Because before you can plant anything, you got to prepare for it, right? So again, we see this. I mean, there's something that is drastically driven within us when it comes to songs. You know, even like I said, words itself. I was talking to Allie yesterday. Don't look at me. I was talking to Allie yesterday, and she was talking about plants and the different, groups and things, and always said music is good for plants. I mean, you guys have known that. That's nothing new. That's nothing. I mean, that's been around for a long time. Music is good for plants, but you know what kind of music makes a difference too. You know. In other words, so it's something that goes beyond words, and it's just something in the music, and it causes even plants in nature to become good, become plentiful, become fruitful, become vibrant. What do you think it does to you? See? We've got to understand what you're putting into you, even if it's subconscious. What you're putting into you affects you. So this is why it's important that we keep our focus on what the Father is wanting for us to do, right? The word for song is also shir. Shir. Quote from the Rabbi Avraham Ariel Trugman here. Now, many of you know, I take Brad Scott's view on the rabbis. I'll quote them when they agree with me. But we all do that, honestly, truth be told, right? You know, I mean, there's a lot of wisdom there, and we don't have to agree with all of them. Matter of fact, as you read through a lot of literature, you see a lot of it is just a few of them disagreeing with each other. You know, and then you have to determine out of that, their thoughts are written down, and you have to determine out of that what really needs to be said, right? So again, it's not like this is what has to be. It's a matter of, well, here's these thoughts, right? Agree or not, here's these thoughts. And so there's a few things that I want to run by you, some from rabbis, some from various scientists and things like that, but things that I want us to keep in mind here, okay? So first, during the exile, the essential connection between prayer and music weakened along the way. For the most part, the prayers and psalms became something to recite, not sing. It became more of an obligation and not a spiritual opportunity and a fulfilling experience. Do we do that? Have we got to a place in our life where these things that Yahweh is wanting us to do, to come before Him and to sing and express our heart and to pour ourselves out in an act of worship before Him, is it an exciting thing for us? Is it a good thing for us to experience, or has it become an obligation? The way we approach Him affects what happens when we approach Him. Okay? And that's why when we come to the tabernacle, you had to look within yourself when you came, because you had to prepare yourself. You're going into the presence of the Most High. You're coming before your King. That doesn't mean don't come. It means get ready, because He's there. Right? It's not a matter of, okay, hey, Jesus is coming, look busy. You know, no. See, He's here with or without you. But let's be acknowledgeable that He is here, and let us enter into His presence. Right? So that's what we have to keep in mind. And somewhere along the way, in the exile, the people of Israel even the songs and the hymns and the things that they hung on to, it can become tradition. Nothing wrong with tradition, but if you approach it, okay, now it's time for this, now it's time for that, now it's time for that, you lose the heart behind it. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying you got to be careful that you don't lose the heart behind it. Don't live like we're in exile, because the Father's calling us to return. And when he calls us to return, do you not think there's going to be joyful singing along the way? Think about when they were standing, they crossed over the sea, the Egyptians were trying to come through after them, the water crushed over them, and Israel went, wow. I don't think so. It got loud, and it says they burst forth into spontaneous song. In the spontaneous song, they were all singing the same thing. That's truly moving with the Spirit of Elohim, right? And so this is what the Father's saying. His Ruach is flowing through his people today, and he's wanting us to be joyful. The things that have held us back, he's crushed them. So don't keep looking at them. It's time to move forward. Okay? And we've got to learn to have this song within us rise up within us so that it can come out, right? You say, well, I can't sing in key, right? That guy, he just said, make a joyful noise. For the ones that he gave the opportunity to sing in key, go for it. But for the ones that he didn't give us the opportunity to sing in key, make your joyful noise. Okay? And we'll give the ones who can sing the mic. I'm one of the ones who can't, okay? But I'm not singing right now, okay? All right. So let's keep going. Let's keep looking forward. The numerical value for a song and prayer, tefillah, is both 515. Now, I only say this just because the point is that the rabbis believe that song and prayer are connected. Song and prayer are connected. You can say, let this be my prayer. You can say, let this be my song. And then how many of the Psalms come out like that? Let this song be a prayer. Let my heart cry, right? So again, there's a connection between song and prayer. And when we're singing, a lot of times, even if they're not our words, a lot of the words that we sing, worship songs that are corporate and things like that, even if it's not our words, it can still be our prayer. It can still be something. It's like, wow, yeah, I feel like that. Well, then sing it. Let it be pouring out an expression of you to the Father, right? Okay. Sound is the initiator designed by God to produce matter and action. Think about that for a second. Let's read that again. Sound is the initiator designed by God to produce matter and action. How many times just in chapter 1 alone of Bereshit, back in the beginning, do we read, and God said? Right? Matter of fact, scientists have come out, they have said that if given the right environment, vibration of sound over water produces light. We knew this. Genesis 1, right? God said, Yehi or, and there was light. So again, we have to look at and see Yahweh is giving us opportunity to create an environment around us for his presence. Granted, he's here all the time, okay? But we're not always mindful of it. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes a song can kind of change that, okay? Sometimes if we don't know how to pray, or if we don't know what to say, or if we don't know what to do, we can still sing. And then sometimes it's that song that breaks us through into the other areas. How many of you have started off with the song just singing to the Father and you end up in prayer? That's what I'm saying. There's something about it that kind of gives this segue to more to happen. Okay? All right. Joshua 6, verses 3 through 5. What do we read? March around the city, all the men of war going into the city at once. And you shall do this for 6 days. 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark, And on the seventh day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, and all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people will go up, everyone straight before them. So what did God say to do? It wasn't the marching around the city that made the walls fall down. It was the sound. It was something about the sound of the shofar, the shout. It's interesting because when you go through and you read through more of that story, we read that the people shouted when they heard the voice of the shofar. It wasn't a matter of the shofars that sounded off that the people shout. No, the way it reads is et kol ha-shofar. There's one single shofar that sounded really loud. Then the people sounded their shofars, and then they shouted, and the walls fell flat. Wonder whose shofar they heard. Something about the sound. Okay? Joshua 24 to 27. So when the people said to Joshua, Yahweh our God, we will serve, and his voice we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day, and he put in place statutes and rules for them at Shechem. And Joshua wrote the words of the book of the law of God, and he took the large stone and set it up there under the terebinth tree. It was by the sanctuary of Yahweh. And Joshua said to all the people, check this out, behold, this stone shall stand as a witness against us. Look at this carefully. For it has heard all the words of Yahweh that he spoke to us. Therefore, it shall be a witness against you, lest you deal falsely with your God. I'm going to stand up this stone that has heard the voice of God to stand as a witness here. The stone heard. You know, why do you think we see scriptures like even the rocks would cry out? We've even come to find out that certain stones, certain rocks can record data, can record sounds, can record things. For those of you who don't understand, I mean, think of quartz. So there's a lot to that. Why does Moses call heaven and earth to stand as witnesses? Because they heard, right? Even creation itself hears the voice of God. And it's the sound that invokes an action in creation, right? 2 Chronicles 20, 21 to 23. When he had taken counsel with the people, he appointed those who were to sing to the Lord and to praise him in holy attire as they went before the army and say, give thanks to Yahweh, for his steadfast love endures forever. And when they began to sing and praise, Yahweh set an ambush against the men of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, who had come against Judah, so that they were routed. And for the men of Ammon and Moab rose against the inhabitants of Mount Seir, devoting them to destruction. And when they had made an end of the inhabitants of Seir, they all helped to destroy one another. They put the people out in front to sing and praise Yahweh, and when they started to sing and praise Yahweh, the enemies of Israel started destroying each other. And when the one overcame the other, they turned on themselves. Wow. That is the power of song. That is the power of our God. That is what happens, guys, when we turn ourselves to focus on the Father. That's what happens. See, what can truly stand against you when you're in his presence, right? So this gives us opportunities to see what happens when you sing, what happens when you praise, what happens when you turn all of who you are to your Father. He fights for you. He goes before you. He makes a way, right? Look, 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 to 18. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with a rousing cry, right? With a shout, right? And with the voice of an archangel and with the sound of the trumpet of God. And the dead in Messiah will rise first. And then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words. With a rousing cry, with a shout, this shout. Again, sound. It's going to make things happen, right? What happens if it's never expressed? What happens if the word of God was never spoke? I mean, there needs to be a people who will speak his word, because that's what's going to help change. Not just us, what's around us, right? Okay. I'm going to show you a few things here. I'm going to butcher some of these names, so I might not say them all, okay? So I'm going to ask forgiveness in advance. If any of these doctors ever hear me say their name, I apologize if I messed it up, okay? Whatever gets back to them. But Dr. Michio Keku, he works in string theory. He is the co-founder of string field theory, and he's one of the main branches of string theory. The latest version of string theory is called M theory. M is for membrane. Okay, so this quote is from him. So we now realize that strings can coexist with membranes. So the subatomic particles we see in nature, quartz, the electrons, are nothing but musical notes on a tiny vibrating string. What is physics? Physics is nothing but the laws of harmony that you can write on vibrating strings. What is chemistry? Chemistry is nothing but the melodies that you can play on interacting, vibrating strings. What is the universe? The universe is a symphony of vibrating strings. And then what is the mind of God that Albert Einstein eloquently wrote about for the last 30 years of his life? We now, for the first time in history, have a candidate for the mind of God. It is the cosmic music resonating through 11-dimensional hyperspace. But first of all, we are nothing but melodies. We are nothing but cosmic music played on vibrating strings and membranes, obeying the laws of physics, which has nothing but the laws of harmony of vibrating strings. What he's saying, we are a song. All of creation is a symphony. We're just a melody in the midst of the symphony. Everything that we are, everything that we do, your whole life is contributing to the song of creation. So what happens when all the pieces flow together and all the parts are in tune with one another? Beautiful. That's the way the Father wants us to be. It's funny because, these are the things that scientists are now coming to realize, and God said it all the time. Right? Notice the quote that I just read from you says, so that we're basically just, the whole universe is just obeying what it is supposed to do. We already knew that. Look, Colossians 1, 12-17. Giving thanks unto the Father, which has made us meet to be partakers in the inheritance of the saints in light, who has delivered us from the power of darkness and has translated us into the kingdom of his dear Son, in whom we have redemption through his blood, even the forgiveness of sins, verse 15, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. For by him were all things created. Now look at this very, very closely. For by him were all things created that are in heaven, that are in the earth, visible and invisible. Whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. That last word, consist, I've read through that before. Why doesn't it say exist? Why does it say consist? The interesting thing is the Greek word relates back to the Hebrew word mitzvah. Mitzvah, command. In other words, all of creation is doing as it was commanded to do when it was created. So he created all things, gave them command, and they're doing it. Trees still produce trees. Fruit still produces fruit. Plants still produce plants. All of creation was made and said, reproduce after a like kind, and it is. We were created and said, choose. And that we still have that in front of us. Choose. Right? Because we missed it. But the Father is telling us to continue to choose him. Choose his life, choose his word, walk in his ways. To bring a matter of restoration. To restore the heart of the Father back to his people. Because it's here. He wants to live with us in that, right? Okay. I've got a few more quotes for you. You ready for some of these? You might like some of these, you might not. But they're fun. Because they're really showing things that we already knew. But it's good to see it being found out and published out there in non-religious forums. Right? Look at a couple things. First, it may seem bizarre, but in my opinion, science offers a surer path to God than religion. People take it for granted that the physical world is both ordered and intelligible. The underlying order in nature, the laws of physics, are simply accepted as given, as brute facts. Nobody asks where they came from. At least they do not do so in polite company. However, even the most atheistic scientist accepts as an act of faith that the universe is not absurd, that there is a rational basis to physical existence manifested as law-like order in nature that is at least partly comprehensible to us. So science can proceed only if the scientist adopts an essentially theological worldview. Pretty cool, huh? Ready for some more? Got a couple more for you. Yet even in earthly matters, I believe that the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power as God and Godhead. And I have never seen anything incompatible between those things of man which can be known by the Spirit of man and which is within him, and those higher things concerning his future which he cannot know by that Spirit. Again, Michael Faraday, who was a devout Christian. Again, this was published in 1870. I have concluded that we are in a world made by rules created by an intelligence. Believe me, everything that we call chance today won't make sense anymore. To me, it is clear that we exist in a plan which is governed by rules that were created, shaped by a universal intelligence, and not by chance. This one. I have looked into most philosophical systems, and I have seen that none will work without God. Science is incompetent to reason upon the creation of matter itself out of nothing. We have reached the utmost limit of our thinking faculties when we have admitted that, because matter cannot be eternal and self-existent. It must have been created. And this one. And last week, American scientists announced that discovery of radiation patterns in space that may mark the beginning of time itself, said astrophysicist George Smoot, leader of the research team. If you're religious, it's like looking at God. The order is so beautiful and the symmetry is so beautiful that you think there is some design behind it. Whatever caused the rapid expansion of the universe following the Big Bang, the same forces cause tiny ripples, because if you try to do something too fast, you shake a little. God might be the designer. Last one I have here from Einstein. You may have heard of him. Everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man, and one in the face of which we with our modest powers must feel humble. In view of such harmony in the cosmos, which I, with my limited human mind, am able to recognize, there are yet people who say there is no God. But what really makes me angry is they quote me for the support of such views. Wow. And then last one I have here, a quote from Rabbi. Through holy music, you can come to a level of prophecy where the essence of devekut, or cleaving to God, is through melody. There's something about a song. There's something about words, melody, harmony, all this coming together that hits you like nothing else can. Okay? And that's why we need to be involved in that. That's why when we come together and we sing, in the services, when we sing, there's something that's happening there that you need to be involved in, That's why when we come before, it's like if all we're doing is just to study is good. We need that. If we don't have an actual act of worship coming out, then we're missing something. There has to be a balance in here. And that doesn't mean forsake one for the other. There there has to be all of this flowing together, right? Proverbs 15, 13 to 15. A merry heart makes a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of the heart the spirit is broken. The heart of him that has understanding seeks knowledge, but the mouth of fools feeds on foolishness. All the days of the afflicted are evil, but he that is of a merry heart has a continual feast. How do we get a merry heart? How do we have a cheerful heart? Does it just happen? No, it doesn't just happen. That's a decision that we wake up with. When we get up in the morning, we have to make that decision. Are we going to have a cheerful heart today? Are we going to have a mindful spirit of the presence of Yah today? Are we going to walk in his ways today? Or am I just going to go through the motions today? Am I just going to let whatever happen today? Or am I actually going to live this day ordered by the one that created me? Right? Live life in his kingdom, right? Okay. Again, music plays a part in this. Because when the heart sings, it can bypass your thinking. And sometimes we need that. Sometimes when the heart sings, it can bypass our thinking because, man, we block ourselves up so much, don't we? We stand in our own way so much, don't we? You know, and so sometimes just to get out of our own way, we need to make that connection with the Father. But if we're too busy with all these other things, stop and sing. That'll help get all these other things out of the way. It'll kind of open up a path for you, you know? Just to a refocus. Okay, refocus. Set the life on the Father. Again, just to make the point of how this works. Got another research study for you. Again, the following is from the article From Singing to Speaking. Okay? Here, I'm just going to read it. It's amazing to see stroke survivors who have lost the ability to speak suddenly produce accurate words when singing familiar songs. This phenomenon was first reported by Swedish physician Olaf Dahlin in 1736. He described a young man who had lost his ability to talk as a result of brain damage, but who surprised townsfolk by singing hymns. He couldn't talk, but he could sing hymns. Huh. The acquired language disorder, now called aphasia, became a subject of clinical study and a target for rehabilitation beginning in the mid-1880s. Since that time, every clinician working with aphasia has seen individuals who can produce words only when singing. Indeed, this observation prompted American neurologist Charles Mills to suggest in 1904 that it might help to play the piano to encourage patients with aphasia to sing well-known songs. So there appear to be psychological benefits, but singing familiar songs alone doesn't seem to improve the speech of people with aphasia. This is probably because words that come automatically when singing are intricately linked to the melodies and are not easily separated. Next point, I want you to think about this next point here. When it says that the words are associated with the melodies, it's not the words alone. The words are associated with the melodies. And so when you hear the melody, you know the song. Right? You don't have to say the words. I can name that tune in 2 notes. Right? You don't have to know the words. Right? So pay attention to this next part of this. The spoken word is a different matter. We know the brain has difficulty starting in the middle of highly memorized spoken passages, like Pledge of Allegiance. Can you start in the middle? Or we need a running start to prime the pump at recall. How many of you, when you start talking about the alphabet, got to start back at A? Why? How you learned it. You learned the melody. You learned there was a method to it. Right? How many of you are singing it now? Like, that's it. I've got it stuck in my head now, right? Because there's something to the melody. It's not just the words, it's not just the pieces, it's the whole thing together. And there's something about that melody that helps get it stuck in you. There's a thing that's called melodic intonation therapy by Gottfried Schlag. He is a neurology professor at Beth Israel, and he went to Harvard Medical School in Boston. What has he got to say about it? Fasting. So, patients with brain damage that left them unable to speak were still able to sing. Most of the connections between brain areas that control movement and those that control hearing are on the left side of the brain. But there's a sort of corresponding hole on the right side. For some reason, it's not as endowed with these connections to the left side that is used in much more in speech. And if you damage the left side, the right side still has trouble fulfilling that role. But as patients learn to put their words to melodies, the crucial connections form on the right side of their brains. Previous brain imaging studies have shown that the singing center is overdeveloped in the brains of professional singers. But during the therapy sessions, patients are taught to put their words into simple melodies. Cool, right? How many of you have heard or know someone who may have had a speech impediment but can sing without it? Interesting. Why? For the reasons that we just read, right? So again, there's something that's healing. There's something that's restorative. There's something that's going on within us in a song, right? So when the heart sings, it can bypass our thinking. Let's look at a couple scriptures here. Deuteronomy 31:19. So now, therefore, write this song for you and teach it to the children of Israel. Put it in their mouths that the song may be a witness for me against the children of Israel. The song was supposed to stand as a witness against the people. And it says specifically because when the parents forget it, your kids are going to be singing it. Aha. Gotcha. But again, that's part of the next generation. That's like part of the songs being passed down, right? Because the song was beyond a melody. It was the melody with the word of the living God. The song was a witness against them. Let's keep reading. Colossians 3:16. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another how? In psalms, hymns, spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. So again, if you're thinking negatively, singing can help get you out of it. And the Psalms are great to use, right? Start reading through the Psalms. I'm sure you'll find one that'll associate, right? And just start reading through the Psalms. You know, you're going to find something in there that's going to hit you where you're at. And what happens when you do that? What happens when you start to sing? What happens when you start to praise? I mean, the word that we look here, Tehillim, the book of Psalms, Tehillim, the word Tehillah means to shine. You change. When you start singing and when you start going through the Psalms, and when you change. Something happens within you. You change. And it goes beyond just words. Right? 2 Kings 3:13-15. Elisha, you know who Elisha was, right? The one who came after Eliyahu, right? So Elisha said to the king of Israel, "What have I to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and to the prophets of your mother." But the king of Israel said to him, "No, it's Yahweh who has called these 3 kings to give them into the hand of Moab." And Elisha said, "As the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, where it is not that I have regard for Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would not neither look at you or nor see you." Again, these 2 kings were going together to prepare to go into war, prepare to go into battle. And again, they went to seek the word of a prophet before they did that. Okay? And so what does Yahweh say regarding this? Verse 15. And so what was the instruction that Elisha told them to do? Now bring me a musician. And when the musician played, the hand of Yahweh came upon him. Why couldn't he just talk? I'm sure he could have. But why did he ask for a musician? Because something about you, something about your focus, something about everything changes in the midst of the music, in the midst of the melody. It all just changes around. You know, a lot of prophets were musicians. And again, it was believed that the spirit of prophecy dwelled within the courtyard of the tabernacle and the temple. The Levites were the musicians that sang and played in those areas. And again, if the presence of Yah was there and they're ministering to him, of course it's going to be there. Right? Look, Psalm 22:3 says, "You are holy, enthroned in the praises of Israel." Enthroned, praise Israel. Psalm 49:3-4 says, "My mouth is about to speak wisdom. My heart's deepest thoughts will give understanding. I will listen with care to God's parable, and I will set my enigma or my riddle to the music of the lyre." Again, when he would play the harp, something about that would come forth, speaking mysteries, speaking the heart of the Father. Again, think about Saul. When he was troubled, what did he ask for? For David to come and play the harp. It didn't even say necessarily that David sang either. Maybe he did, okay? But he came and he played, and as he played, the spirits that tormented Saul left. The music brought deliverance to his spirit. Again, there's something here that we need to be mindful of. Okay? It's not just a weapon at your disposal, but it's something within us that can help keep that connection to Yah even throughout the day. You know, he said to pray without ceasing. It means just pray often. Well, some of that can be in singing, right? What a great way to do that when you're in the car. That way you don't keep your eyes open. Isaiah 30, verse 31. Adonai's voice will terrify Ashur, and with his scepter he strikes them down. Every sweep of the punishing rod that Adonai imposes on him will be to tambourines and lyres as he brandishes his arm against them in battle. Yahweh says he's going to destroy Ashur, and he strike them down with musical instruments. And every time the rod comes through, it's going to be to the beat and the rhythm of the song. Say, careful, you know God's really mad when he starts getting you in syllables, right? Yeah, some of you got that. 1 Chronicles 16, 39-42. And he left Zadok the priest and his brothers the priests before the tabernacle of the Lord in the high place that was at Gibeon, and to offer burnt offerings to Yahweh on the altar of burnt offering regularly, morning and evening, to do all that is within the law of the Lord that commanded Israel. With them were Herman and Jeduthun, and the rest of these chosen and expressly named to give thanks to the Lord, for his steadfast love endures forever. Herman and Jeduthun had trumpets and cymbals for the music and instruments for the sacred song, and the sons of Jeduthun were appointed to the gate. Again, they were appointed to the gate, and these men of Zadok, they were there, and what were they there to do? To stand guard, to protect, and to sing, and to play, right? Psalm 65. 12 and 13. The pastures of the wilderness overflow. The hills gird themselves with joy. They're alive with the sound of music, as you might say. Verse 13. The meadows clothe themselves with flocks. The valleys deck themselves with grain. And they shout and they sing together with joy. The word sing again, the word shear. Again, creation itself sings. Creation itself testifies. Creation itself is playing a symphony, which, by the way, it seems we just heard that science is saying that's so. Right? 2 Chronicles 5:13. It was the duty of the trumpeters and the singers, again, yes, singers, word shear, the word singers, to make themselves heard in unison in praise and thanksgiving to the Lord. And when the song was raised, the trumpets and the cymbals and other musical instruments to praise the Lord, for he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever. The house of the Lord was filled with the cloud. When the time came and they sang forth and the praise and their hearts cried out, the presence of Yah was in their midst. The house filled with the cloud. Testifying he was there. Right? Isn't that what we want? The presence of Yah in our life? To live in it, to walk in it, to dwell in it, to be living life in his kingdom here and now? We can. Zephaniah 3:17. The Lord your God is in your midst. He is a mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness, and he will quiet you by his love. He will exult over you with loud singing. I could be wrong here, but it seems to me that's the only place in Scripture where it says God sings. He rejoices over you with loud singing. Ezekiel 43. Behold, the glory of the God of Israel was coming from the east, and the sound, the word there for sound is voice. And his voice of his coming was like the sound of many waters, and the earth shone with his glory. Yahweh sings. How many people are going to hear it? It's going to be worldwide, isn't it? When Yahweh came down on the mountain and the sound of the shofar sounded louder and louder and louder, and he spoke, all earth trembled. Something about this connection, guys. Ephesians 5:19 and 20. Addressing one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing, making melodies of the Lord in your heart, giving thanks always and for everything to God of the Father in the name of our Lord Yeshua. That's what we should be doing, right? Look back at Colossians 3. Colossians 3, verse 12. So put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, and so you also must forgive. And above all these things, put on love, which binds everyone together in perfect harmony. I know this just means getting along, getting together, but it's an interesting choice of words. Because harmony means they're two different things, but they go together so well. Right? Next verse, 15. Let the peace of Messiah rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Messiah dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts toward God. And whatever you do, and what do you do? Whatever you do, right? In word or deed, do everything in the name of our Lord Yeshua, giving thanks to God the Father through him. So let's end how we started. Take a look back. You know, as we read through this before, consider what we've just went through, the scriptures that we just went through, the things we've just heard and learned, and think about this in this context. And I encourage you, maybe even, later on the day, go back, pull it up, read it again, and consider it. Psalm 119, 49 to 56. Remember your word to your servant, in which you have made me hope. This is my comfort in my affliction, that your promise gives me life. The insolent utterly deride me, but I do not turn away from your law. When I think of your rules from of old, I take comfort, Yahweh. Hot indignation seizes me because of the wicked who forsake your law. Your statutes have been my songs in the house of my sojourning. I remember your name in the night, Yahweh. Keep your law. This blessing has fallen from me, that I have kept your precepts. Wow. Last thought. Matthew 12:34. Out of the abundance of the heart, what? Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Psalm 19:14. Something for us to consider. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Yahweh, my strength, my Redeemer. Amen? Man, I challenge you today to sing. Think about that for a minute. What? Yeah, that's your homework. I challenge you today to sing a song and see what happens. I'm not even telling you what song you got to sing. Just sing a song. And let your heart, let your heart make it known, Lord your God. Sing out, right? All stand. Numbers chapter 6. Yahweh told Moses and Aaron, when you bless my children, I will place my name upon them and give them peace. He said, when you bless them, you shall bless them. Give it